My sister slammed her wine glass down on the Christmas dinner table and said, "You don't even need it. I want your $9 million, the investments, everything." I looked around the room expecting my parents to defend me, but my mother just nodded coldly and said, "Give it to her, Kendra. She deserves a good life more than you do." Everyone at that table thought they could ruin me, smiling like they'd already won, but they had absolutely no idea what was coming next. I laughed out loud, opened my phone, and within seconds my mom screamed, "Oh no, 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 you can't do that." Follow my story until the end to see the look on their faces when the trap snapped shut, and comment below the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Kendra, and at 34 years old, I've finally learned that blood doesn't make you family, respect does. Growing up, I was the ghost in my own household. My younger sister, Chloe, was the undisputed golden child, a fragile princess whose every whim was treated like a royal decree by our parents. If Chloe wanted a toy, it was bought instantly, even if it meant canceling my birthday plans. If Chloe failed a class, my parents blamed the school system. If I got anything less than an A, I was grounded for a week. I learned very early that my only value to them was what I could provide, or how quietly I could stay out of Chloe's spotlight. So, I chose to become invisible. While Chloe spent her 20s bouncing from one failed, expensive hobby to another, all funded by my parents' rapidly depleting savings, I put my head down and worked. 10 years ago, I started a niche tech consulting firm from my cramped studio apartment. I survived on ramen, worked 18-hour days, and poured every ounce of my energy into building my business. Over the last decade, that hustle paid off immensely. My company grew into an industry leader, and through smart investments, I achieved a personal net worth of $9 million. But I kept it completely secret. My family still thought I was just a struggling, low-level freelance programmer. I knew exactly what would happen if they ever found out about my wealth. They wouldn't be proud. They would look at my bank account like an open buffet. I arrived at my parents' house for Christmas dinner with nothing but a plate of homemade side dishes and a desire to just get through the evening without any major drama. The holiday music was playing, the tree was lit, and for the first 20 minutes, it almost felt like a normal family gathering. But the illusion didn't last long. I left my purse on the entryway table when I went to help my mother in the kitchen, a mistake I would soon realize would change everything. Chloe had gone to fetch some extra napkins, but instead, she decided to rifle through my personal belongings. When we all sat down at the beautifully set dining table, the atmosphere suddenly shifted from festive to predatory. Chloe didn't look at her food. She looked directly at me with a smirk that made my stomach drop. Before the main course was even carved, she cleared her throat loudly, tapping her wine glass with a fork to command everyone's attention. "So, Kendra," Chloe said, her voice dripping with venomous sarcasm, "are you going to tell Mom and Dad about your little secret? Or should I do it for you?" I froze, my fork suspended in midair as my parents turned to look at me, their curiosity instantly piqued. Chloe pulled a neatly folded piece of paper from her pocket and slammed it onto the mahogany table. It was a high-end corporate tax document from my firm, detailing my personal asset distribution for the quarter. "Our quiet little Kendra is a multimillionaire," Chloe announced, her eyes gleaming with greed. "She is worth $9 million. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sharp intake of my mother's breath. My father stared at the document on the table, his eyes widening as the numbers finally sank in. For a second, I thought, naively, that they might be proud of me. Instead, the air grew instantly hostile. Chloe leaned forward, her synthetic sympathy instantly vanishing, replaced by an aggressive look of entitlement. "You don't even need that kind of money, Kendra," she demanded loudly, slamming her hand down. "I want your $9 million, the investments, everything. I have massive lifestyle debts to clear, and I need to fund my luxury boutique idea. I looked around the table expecting my parents to step in and put an end to this absolute madness. But my mother just set her glass down coldly, her eyes locking onto mine without a single shred of maternal warmth. "Give it to her, Kendra," she said, her voice dripping with calculated gaslighting. "Chloe deserves a good life more than you do. You've always been independent and stubborn, but your sister is fragile. She needs the security. It's only fair that you share this with your actual bloodline." My father nodded in agreement, crossing his arms tightly. "Your mother is right," he added harshly. "You're being incredibly selfish hoarding that wealth while your own sister struggles to make ends meet." They began tag-teaming me, unleashing a barrage of guilt trips and cruel remarks, acting as if my decade of grueling 18-hour workdays was just a lucky lottery ticket I was obligated to hand over. They issued an ultimatum: sign over the assets, or be entirely cut off from the family. They all sat there staring at me, their faces twisted with an ugly, triumphant certainty. They truly believed they had backed me into a corner, confident that their toxic guilt trips and the threat of exile would force me to bend to their will. Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement, her eyes darting toward her phone as if she was already visualizing the luxury sports cars and designer clothes she was going to buy with my hard-earned life savings. My parents looked down at me with cold, expectant glares, waiting for the tears or the frantic begging to start. But I didn't cry, and I certainly didn't beg. Instead, a wave of absolute freezing clarity washed over me. The final traces of childhood longing for their approval simply evaporated into the air. I looked at the three of them, and then, to their complete bewilderment, I laughed out loud. The sound echoed sharply through the tense dining room, instantly erasing the smug smiles from their faces. With my sudden outburst of pure amusement, my unexpected reaction completely threw them off guard, leaving them speechless. Without saying a single word to break the stunned silence, I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I unlocked the screen and opened up my primary corporate banking and corporate management applications. My fingers moved across the glass with deliberate theatrical precision. They thought they were the ones executing a brilliant ambush, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just walked directly into a trap that had been quietly waiting for them for years. I looked up from the glowing screen, my expression completely blank, as my family stared at me in absolute tongue-tied confusion. "What are you doing, Kendra?" Chloe snapped, her voice losing its triumphant edge, replaced by a sudden spike of nervous irritation. "This isn't a joke. Put your phone away and give us an answer." I set the device down on the center of the table with a soft click. "Oh, I just gave you your answer," I replied smoothly, leaning back in my chair. "You see, for the past 4 years, you haven't been living off Dad's brilliant investments or Mom's careful budgeting. You've been living off me." The color began to drain from my father's face as I continued. "Through an anonymous, private corporate LLC I established years ago to keep my distance, I had been quietly paying off the remaining $700,000 of my parents' massive home mortgage. Not only that, but I was also fully subsidizing Chloe's luxury sports car leases and funding her high-end corporate health insurance plans under the guise of an executive tech benefit. They thought they were independent, completely unaware that my hidden financial ecosystem was the only thing preventing their entire lifestyle from collapsing into bankruptcy. With just 3 precise taps on my screen, I instructed my corporate accountant to immediately dissolve the LLC, terminate all automated subsidy payments, and transfer the full property tax and loan liabilities back into their individual names. I revoked Chloe's insurance access effective immediately. I looked at them and smiled. "Merry Christmas." For a few seconds, the dining room was completely dead silent as my words hung heavily in the air. Then, Right on cue, a chorus of sharp, frantic digital chimes shattered the quiet. My father's phone vibrated violently against the wood, followed immediately by 2 successive alert pings from Chloe's device. My mother snatched up her phone, her eyes scanning the urgent notifications from their banking app. The automated alerts explicitly stated that their primary mortgage subsidy had been permanently canceled, and that an immediate balance adjustment of thousands of dollars was now due. Chloe's screen lit up with a high-priority alert from the dealership, notifying her that her luxury car lease account had been flagged for immediate payment authorization or repossession. Absolute, unadulterated chaos erupted at the Christmas dinner table. The triumphant, greedy smirks they had been wearing just moments ago completely vanished, replaced by masks of pure panic and raw desperation. Without warning, my mother frantically jumped entirely out of her wooden chair, her cracking voice screeching out in a high-pitched, desperate panic. "Oh no, 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 you can't do that!" Chloe let out a piercing scream right after her, gripping her hair tightly as she yelled, "OMG! No! Are you crazy?" They had sat at this table plotting to extort $9 million from me, completely oblivious to the reality that they were entirely dependent on my quiet generosity. I calmly stood up, picked up my coat, and left my untouched Christmas plate behind. I walked out into the cold winter night, locking the door on their toxicity forever. 3 months have passed since that fateful Christmas night, and my life has transformed into a sanctuary of absolute peace. Moving away from that toxic environment allowed me to focus entirely on scaling my firm, while my family had faced the harsh reality of the financial hole they dug for themselves. According to the updates from my legal team, my parents were forced to downsize drastically after failing to meet the heavy mortgage payments, ultimately moving into a modest, cramped apartment. Chloe's luxury car was repossessed just 3 weeks after the holiday, and she is now working 2 retail jobs just to cover her basic living expenses and mounting debts. They tried calling and messaging me hundreds of times, shifting from furious insults to pathetic begging, but I blocked their numbers across all platforms without a single shred of regret. Looking back, pulling the plug wasn't just about financial retaliation. It was about reclaiming my dignity and setting an unbreakable boundary against toxic entitlement. Now, I have a deep, psychological question for all of you who listened to my journey until the very end. If your own flesh and blood cornered you and demanded you hand over your hard-earned life savings, would you have walked away quietly? Or would you have pulled the plug on them just like I did? Comment your honest thoughts below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more dramatic stories, and click on the next video appearing on your screen right now to discover another shocking family betrayal that will definitely surprise you.